Breaking 5,400 FBI and ICE agents raid CJNE's California network worth $3.8.
We start with news of a multi-agency mission in Hays County resulting in the arrest of more than 40.
Texas and California woke up in a different reality. What was supposed to be a series of routine inspections erupted into synchronized raids across dozens of locations tied to a Venezuelan drug cartel. Streets were sealed off by black federal vans. Battering rams smashed through doors, and the air split with shouted commands. Within minutes, federal agents pulled 113 suspects out of hidden compartments, among them 16 active and former police officers who were meant to protect their communities, but, as it turned out, had been working for the cartel. It looked like the opening scene of a war. Weapons, packaged narcotics, classified documents, coded ledgers. In several buildings, agents found the same operational layouts they had seen during major raids in Los Angeles and Houston, sites where millions of fentanyl pills had been seized, dozens of hostages rescued, and evidence uncovered of global chemical supply chains feeding the cartel's empire. Federal officials say this wasn't just a raid, it was the biggest strike against the cartel in a decade, and it's only the beginning. The operation swept across 2 states, Texas and California, the central arteries of America's narcotics corridors. In Texas, where the border forms a natural pipeline for freight movement, agents simultaneously entered warehouses near El Paso and high-volume logistics terminals through which the cartel had funneled tons of product for years. In California, raids hit the suburbs of Los Angeles, a region federal investigators call the most powerful transshipment hub on the West Coast. Among those arrested were 2 sheriffs, 3 customs officers, and several police officers who had taken bribes to provide clean corridors and shield illegal cargo. The operation spanned more than a dozen sites across 3 cities and became the largest blow to the cartel's regional network in recent years. Intelligence gathered after similar raids in Los Angeles and Houston finally revealed the full picture, from local corruption to interstate logistics. The rollout of the Texas operation began long before the morning raids. A year earlier, federal security officials received an anonymous report, short, unsigned, but filled with details only an insider could know. Drivers' names, van numbers, border crossing timestamps, and the surname of the sheriff who guaranteed safe passage for narcotics. At first, it seemed like someone settling a personal score, but within 2 weeks, HSI and DEA agents confirmed the first overlaps with suspicious shipments entering from Mexico under the guise of industrial materials. That was the moment a full-scale, months-long operation began. A joint task force was assembled. FBI, DEA, HSI, and financial analysts from the Department of Justice. Such an interagency lineup is typically reserved only for cases involving international narcotics, chemical supply chains, and high-level contraband networks. It quickly became clear this was exactly that kind of case. Federal agents placed wiretaps on phones belonging to several suspected logistics operatives. The conversations were clipped, coded, and careful, yet mistakes slipped through. References to crossing dates, crypto wallets, couriers receiving packages not at the border, but in rented hangars 70 miles from it. Eventually, undercover agents conducted 2 controlled buys, officially assistance with transporting medical reagents, but in reality, a quality check of methamphetamine disguised as industrial chemicals. The intelligence mosaic began to take shape. Crypto payments routed through clean wallets owned by shell companies, falsified customs documentation allowing cargo to pass without secondary inspection, a courier network that crossed the border individually but operated as a synchronized machine once inside the United States. The deeper agents dug into the digital traces, the clearer one central figure emerged, the sheriff of a small Texas county with access to databases, alert systems, and customs inspectors. Surveillance on him lasted more than 7 months. He was cautious, changed routes frequently, used disposable phones, but his own mistake became the trigger for the operation. A week before the raid, he held a meeting in his office with 2 cartel coordinators, unaware that agents were already tracking their vehicle after a failed attempt to move cash toward New Mexico. External surveillance cameras captured everything: the handoff of a package, the safe he opened at 10:43 p.m., and the moment he transferred bundles of cash into a black duffel bag. When the federal team entered his office at 5:18 a.m., there was no resistance. He sat at his desk as if waiting. Inside the safe, agents found packaged blocks of methamphetamine, $320,000 in cash, and encrypted documents listing routes, code identifiers for drivers, coordinates of temporary stash locations, and payment records made in cryptocurrency to offshore wallets. This wasn't simple corruption. It was command-level management of a criminal network linking Mexico, Texas, and the West Coast. According to investigative files, the sheriff personally coordinated inspection windows at the border, warned couriers about upcoming checks, and managed the movement of trafficked product between Interstate 10 and local warehouses disguised as logistics firms. For federal agents, this marked the conclusion of one of the most complex operations in recent years, an operation that began with a single anonymous letter and exposed a multi-layered system of smuggling, financing, and corruption protected by officials entrusted with authority. And even though the central figure has been arrested, investigative reports point to one more line. This sheriff was merely the man holding the door open. Those standing behind him remain in the shadows. At the core of the criminal network lay something that is usually the most untouchable element of the state system, the police uniform, and it became the perfect disguise. When vans moved out of the border zones at night, they weren't. Protected by cartel-hired guards, they were escorted by patrol cars broadcasting official call signs. Radio channels carried codes that, within the system, meant active pursuit of a suspect or evidence evacuation. In reality, the vans were loaded with methamphetamine bricks, fentanyl tablets, unregistered weapons, and, at times, human beings hidden behind false walls. The scheme operated with surgical precision. The cartel smuggled chemical concentrates and precursors inside small shipments disguised as industrial raw materials. Then the second tier took over, laboratories on the outskirts of Texas cities, usually in industrial zones where night noises don't raise suspicion. There, hired technicians mixed compounds, pressed pills, or repackaged meth for lower-level couriers. These labs never stopped. Raw materials arrived 2 or 3 times a week, and finished product left almost immediately. After production, the cargo moved into the third tier, protected routes maintained by corrupt officials. This was where the police uniform gave the cartel something impossible to buy on the black market: legal movement. When a patrol unit opened the highway, no one dared stop a van marked as part of a special operation. Fake reports of pursuing armed suspects were frequently filed, allowing streets to be blocked off and corridors created without witnesses. Some vans carried not only narcotics but also undocumented migrants, whom the cartel sold into forced labor or used as debt payments. These people were kept in the same warehouses used to store chemicals and weapons. Surveillance cameras recovered during raids in Los Angeles and Houston confirmed these practices in other operations, where human trafficking was not a side activity, but a fully integrated part of the cartel's business model. The financial chain was just as complex. Payments moved through crypto wallets and then vanished into a network of shell companies. Part of the funds was immediately converted and sent abroad to China, Central America, or offshore jurisdictions. A similar multi-layer crypto finance system had already been uncovered during Operation Box Cutter, where Chinese chemical suppliers used blockchain to move tens of thousands of dollars a month under the guise of scientific purchases. Texas operated a nearly identical structure, though on a smaller scale. Several warehouses, investigators discovered, were also used for smuggling technology, microchips, communication modules, and dual-use equipment. This wasn't unusual. In other cases, federal teams found components under export control stored in the same ordinary industrial units. The distribution logic was simple. Weapons and technology flowed south. Narcotics and profit flowed north. The final tier was the distribution network that released the product across California, Arizona, and Texas. Their job wasn't just selling narcotics, it was manufacturing demand. They sold product in batches worth tens of thousands of dollars and assumed the risks of shootouts and conflicts with rival groups. Why was this scheme so dangerous? First, the scale. Each run carried enough fentanyl to kill thousands. Second, the involvement of corrupt officials, which granted the cartel immunity and control of critical routes. Third, the multi-structured nature of the business. drugs, human trafficking, weapons, technology, and financial systems intertwined so tightly that dismantling a single tier was never enough. Federal investigators called this model a shadow copy of the state, its own customs corridors, its own law enforcement, its own economy. And as long as it operated, every flashing police light on a patrol car could mean not community protection, but another contract being fulfilled for the cartel. The investigation reached a new level when financial analysts traced the movement of funds through a chain of shell companies in California, ranging from import-export agencies to businesses that existed only on paper. Over the past 14 months, more than $31 million moved through these entities, money that investigators say originated from the Venezuelan cartel Oriente. The funds were broken into hundreds of microtransactions, mixed with legitimate revenue streams, and returned to the U.S. already clean, where they financed laboratories, logistics, and bribes to officials. Preparation for the operation lasted several weeks. Federal agents from the FBI, DEA, and HSI coordinated closely with local police units, specifically those not under suspicion, to avoid leaks. 4 mobile teams were assembled: an assault unit, a containment unit, a technical unit, and a documentation group. Analysts built a detailed assault map marking entry points, possible fortified areas, evidence storage locations, and administrative rooms where corrupt officials were likely stationed. Federal Command decided to act today after receiving intelligence about a new shipment expected to arrive in Texas within 36 hours. There were indications that parts of the network had already realized they were under surveillance and were preparing to move cash, destroy documents, and abandon key warehouse locations. Any delay risked the escape of high-value targets and the loss of critical evidence. At 03:40 a.m., teams moved into position. When the final intelligence confirmations reached the command center, the operation transitioned into its active phase. What followed was a coordinated, multi-stage, perfectly timed assault. The results stunned even veteran agents. A total of 1.8 metric tons of synthetic narcotics were seized, including concentrated fentanyl and high-purity methamphetamine. Investigators estimate the haul carried enough material to manufacture over 50 million potentially lethal doses, capable of triggering a wave of overdoses across multiple states simultaneously. The scale of the seizure is compared to record operations in Los Angeles and Ohio, where federal teams intercepted hundreds of kilograms of fentanyl precursors and industrial-grade production lines. Investigators noted that the cartel used a hybrid communication system built on encrypted messengers, disposable accounts, and even a set of emoji signals that served as coded operational markers. Beyond the narcotics, agents recovered 37 firearms, automatic rifles, sawed-off shotguns, unnumbered pistols, and several improvised suppressors. Parts of the arsenal were hidden inside warehouse walls. Others were stored in administrative rooms accessible only to the corrupt officers involved. Financial findings were just as revealing. Over $1.1 million in cash, 12 crypto wallets showing 6-figure transaction volumes, and 2 fireproof safes containing the cartel's internal ledgers, detailing payments for security, transport, and bribery. Among the counterfeit documents were falsified customs declarations, fake chemical transport licenses, and dozens of identity cards and driver's licenses under various names. The technical seizures underscored the network's sophistication. Servers containing backups of crypto operations, portable encrypted radios, tablet devices used for route coordination, and several cryptographic modules identical to those seized during other international operations. 14 trafficked individuals were rescued during the raids, among them workers forced into underground labs and 2 drivers who had been held under constant threats. 10 couriers and 3 route coordinators were arrested on site. The combined evidence, narcotics, weapons, technology, documents, and rescued victims made it clear that this wasn't a local cell, but a fully developed criminal infrastructure functioning as a parallel shadow economy. The cartel's minimalist communication structure allowed corrupt officers and logistics coordinators to stay in contact without writing messages that could be decrypted. Similar tactics were observed in prior operations targeting networks that hid their communication inside encrypted devices and crypto servers. Agents explained that the scheme was dangerous because it combined 3 rare elements: state authority, organized narcotics trafficking, and a cryptographically protected financial system. That is why it lasted so long. Fake police operations, official escorts, private radio frequencies, and clean routes created an illusion of legitimacy that was nearly impossible to penetrate from the outside. The breakthrough happened only after the technical team decoded the emoji patterns and matched them to the movement of vans. After that came wiretaps, cryptoforensics, token substitution, and access to servers seized during similar operations nationwide. One HSI agent summarized it: "We didn't just intercept a shipment, we severed the spine of the network, its communications, its finances, and its corrupted corridors." An FBI official was even more blunt: "This is the first operation where we broke routes, people, data, and money all at once. These structures live in the shadows for years until someone forces light into them." Compared to previous operations that targeted only labs or financial servers, this one dismantled the entire vertical, from corrupt Texas officers to California shell companies. And because of that, agents say, this wasn't just a raid, it was a precedent that changes the rules of the game. The operation proved one thing: this wasn't about isolated betrayals, but systemic infiltration of state institutions. When a border agent or police officer works for a cartel, the entire country is put at risk. As one agent said, "We broke the network, but the war isn't over. More strikes are already underway."